All right, man, peace. So one of the aspects of the Golden State Warriors that makes them singularly great and strangely great is that their best player is not their leader, or at least not their verbal or spiritual leader. And that happens to be Mr. Draymond Green. He is the engine that makes them go in regards to who makes sure that they stay grounded no matter what they do. Because their two most talented players, that being Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, they can be rattled mentally. Draymond can be rattled as well, but in a totally different direction. He becomes more aggressive. You can get Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, if they're subjected to highly physical play, become less aggressive. Well, anyway, they sat down with Draymond in the aftermath of their sweep of the Cleveland Cavaliers to hear what he had to say. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Draymond Green, I want to start asking about that. After what happened last year, because you guys are competitors and perfectionists, how much did you want to right the wrong of Game 4 a year ago and finish this off?
Isn't that something? The team is so great that the MC is going to ask one of their best players, how much did you want to right the wrong of losing one game in the finals last year? That's an embarrassment to LeBron James.
We definitely did. We completely laid an egg last year in Game 4. And we knew coming out here, we wanted to give it our best shot. And if that didn't win us the game, then that's fine. We can live with that. But coming out here, not focused, thinking we're just going to walk into a win like we did last year, we couldn't make that mistake again.
I did not think that the Golden State Warriors were going to lose Game 4 this season. I thought that there was no way in the world that they were going to lose Game 4 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Number one, they lost it last year, and the only reason why they lost it is because the Cleveland Cavaliers had Kyrie Irving. He was the player who brought the potency offensively to the Cleveland Cavaliers in regards to his ability to be another threat apart from LeBron James. Not only did Kyrie open things up for LeBron, he also opened things up for their shooters. The Cavaliers had what I believe is a record amount of threes hit in that game. And that's what it took for them to beat the Golden State Warriors.
No, it's remarkable. 3 championships in 4 years. The first one probably was just super exciting. It was fun. And how do you describe this feeling right now? Does it get old, getting the champagne and winning? What are you going through your mind right now from an emotional standpoint?
It can be getting old. All those players are only 28, 29, 30 years old. They're just getting started. They have at least another 3 to 4 years of winning, assuming that they stay together. They don't lose focus. They don't allow any type of outside forces to bring division within their ranks. And there are not any catastrophic injuries. They should be good to go for the next 3 to 4 years. I'm not saying that they're going to necessarily win the championship over the next 4 years. But they should win at least 3 of the next 4 championships as long as they stay healthy. I don't really see anyone else beating them. Now, we'll see what LeBron James does. If LeBron decides to humble himself and go to the San Antonio Spurs, you never know what can happen.
Good point.
Man, the feeling definitely never gets old. It's kind of hard to put it in words, but one thing I will tell you is this one right here, it was the toughest one yet. With all the injuries we went through during the season, Steph out to start the playoffs, our battle with Houston, they was a great ball club, pushed us to, they gave us everything we could handle in that series. To coming out here and Clay pretty much limping through all 4 games, Andre missing the first 2, everything.
You forget about that. That's how much of a dog Klay Thompson is. That he suffered that injury in Game 1, and no one has pretty much mentioned it because, as Steve Kerr states about Klay Thompson, he's no maintenance.
Everything we went through, this one was the toughest one, and it probably feels the best of all of them.
I talked to Coach Izzo, and when he talks about you, he says, all I can say is he's a winner. Same with Coach Kerr. When you talk about all the stuff you've been through this year, and then you look back at your career and your history, forget skill. What has been your greatest asset as a leader in the locker room?
Draymond Green's greatest asset as a leader is his grit. He brings something that they very richly need, which is an alpha male personality. They don't have that in that locker room. I'm not necessarily calling Draymond an alpha, but he has that role on that team because no one else is truly aggressive enough to take that vocal role on that squad. That's not in Steph Curry's nature to be an outwardly vocal leader. And to be quite frank with you, he has issues with his focus from game to game. He has issues with his focus from possession to possession. If that guy hits 2 or 3 3-pointers in a row, he stands and poses and forgets to get back on defense. So that's what makes their team mesh so well. All of their players, what they bring to the table, the other players don't. I mean, outside of outside shooting, and even in that way, even in the way in which Klay Thompson and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant hit their outside shot, they do it in a different way. Kevin Durant is more of a long two-point jump shooter. Of course, he can make threes, but he mostly takes long two-point jump shots. Klay Thompson, he likes to take his three-pointers off the catch. Steph Curry, he likes to pull up for three off the dribble. So they all bring different components to the team.
I think, just number one, always willing to give anything for the team. It's never about me. Whatever I would want for myself personally or anything like that, it's always just giving for the team.
Well, bro, let's be for real. You have to have that attitude because you're not good enough to say, I want more shots. You're just not. You can't shoot worth a lick, to be honest with you. They're giving you wide open looks. You claim that you're practicing your jump shot. I don't see it. Number one, you got an ugly-ass jump shot. Number two, they're leaving you wide open as an NBA player. You're not making any of your long-range shots. You have to work on that in the offseason, bro. Bottom line. Your team will be so much more potent if you can make wide-open jump shots and you take too many threes.
Team, man. Putting my body on the line every night, doing whatever I can to help my guys out.
You definitely a junkyard dog, no doubt about that. And one of the strongest dudes in the NBA, pound for pound. The way that he wrestles and fights with big men every night, that cannot be understated.
I think that's the most important thing for me, and I try to do that night in and night out.
Why'd you put a battery in Durant back like that, though? Why you? He don't need a battery in his back.
Do something different.
Oh, man.
I asked KD and Klay this. You're around Draymond Green every day. Is he just as annoying in person as he is on television?
Charles keeps asking everyone the same questions about Draymond, trying to hide the fact that he does not like Draymond. He's trying to act as if he's palling around with him. Charles does not like Draymond. Once again, Draymond represents to Charles everything that he wishes he was in regards to winning. Charles looks at Draymond and says, this dude reminds me a lot of myself, except he's nowhere near as talented as me offensively, and he's been fortunate enough to be on a team where he's won 3 championships and I never got one. And Charles still tells himself every night that the reason why he doesn't have a chip is because of Michael Jordan. No. It's because you were not a good enough leader after Michael Jordan retired to make sure that your team was able to accrue a championship. You lost to Hakeem Olajuwon. Your real adversary was Hakeem. It wasn't Michael, because Michael had no peers in the 90s anyway. He had no peers in the 90s. So your real rival was Hakeem Olajuwon. You lost to him twice. But once again, he's trying to act as if he does not really dislike Draymond, and he clearly does. Draymond doesn't give a fuck, because I'm sure that Draymond understands what the real issue is. And we see this a lot in the so-called black community, this silly generational rivalry that many immature, older so-called black males try to have with younger black males. As opposed to congratulating them for their accomplishments, they're still jealous and oftentimes bitter about their own inability to make their dreams come true when they had the opportunity.
Honestly, I may be. I may be, but I think at the end of the day, that's my job. These guys come out here, they're scoring the ball every night, 20, 30, 40 points. It's my job to be that guy who nitpicks on everything, who gets under everyone else's skin, who... Yeah,
you're irritating. You do a great job. Like the modern-day Dennis Rodman with a couple of other wrinkles. And there are players like this in every generation. 15 years ago, it was Rasheed Wallace. 25 years ago, it was Dennis Rodman. Those type of players, they always pop up.
And who's, kind of that force behind everything. And so they won't say it because they love me, but I probably am.
Congratulations, man. Well played.
Thank you.
Draymond, one other thing. I mean, obviously your core, your 4 guys, you, the all-stars that you guys are. You guys, sometimes teams, when they have a lot of success, they don't handle that well. And you guys seem to handle it. You get along. You play unselfishly. You play for one another. Just talk about that spirit and that camaraderie that we've seen on display over these last 4 years.
They have a great mix. Once again, their most outgoing, quote-unquote, leader is Draymond Green, and he's the least talented of the bunch. So they don't have to worry about him saying, I want more shots, because he knows he does not deserve them. Now, the more introverted superstars on their team, that being Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, if not introverted, at least more subdued. They're not the type that's going to offend the other players in the locker room with their words. So it provides a very good mix in regards to chemistry. And then, of course, once again, Klay Thompson is no maintenance. So who is it who's going to come into the locker room and say, I want more shots, I need more shine? Steph already has had his opportunity to get shine. He had 2 years by himself where he led the team to the finals. One time he was able to be victorious. The other time he came up short. Kevin Durant has been on the team for the last 2 years. So it's not like Steph has been under Durant's shadow for his whole career. He's already had his time to be a superstar. He's still a superstar. Even though, to be quite frank with you, Durant has clearly outshone him in these last 2 finals. And I'm pretty sure that Steph has to feel a certain type of way about it, because last year it was basically Steph Curry playing the very magnanimous house host to Kevin Durant, basically rolling out the red carpet for him, allowing him to take over parts of the team, especially in the most important playoff games, particularly in the finals. Steph pretty much gave it over to KD and said, go do your thing. This year was supposed to be Steph's year in the finals. So, as I stated in the video that I did on Steph Curry and him breaking down and crying after Game 3, he understood what that meant. He tried to have a big game in Game 4, but it was not going to be enough. Why is that? Because the series was already over. So, they were not even going to look back at Games 1 and 2 and say, well, Steph Curry was the reason why they won those games, because the most spectacular performance in a winning effort for this series was Kevin Durant in Game 3, the same game in which Steph Curry had by far his most glaringly bad game. So he has no one else to blame for why he lost or why he came up short in regards to the NBA Finals MVP race in this series. But once again, that's why they don't really have any chemistry issues, at least thus far. Even though I did believe that there was some potentiality for a possible flare-up between Steph Curry and Kevin Durant when Durant made some of his statements about Under Armour sneakers. Durant has to be very careful with that.
Well, that's what this whole thing has been built on. It was built on selflessness. We always go back to the story of Andre willing to come off the bench when Steve came in. That's what it's all been built on. It's never been about Steph like, I need to get the MVP. It's all of us like, no, let's try to help him get the MVP. And, you go.
Did you see how Draymond Green brought that up unprompted? Because they know what the real undercurrent was, what the real narrative was during Game 3 and after Game 3. And they know that certain people caught Steph Curry crying after Game 3. So now they're trying to douse the flames in regards to that story, because they know that there is a slight potential for there to be some potential acrimony between Steph Curry and Kevin Durant over that issue if they're not careful. But I don't see that at all, because Curry is mature enough to understand that he has to contain any possible envy that he may have towards Kevin Durant due to the fact that he had his opportunity and he came up short in Game 3. That was his time to cement himself as the NBA Finals MVP. Had he had the game in Game 3 that he had in Game 4, they would have given him the award. But he came up short. It is what it is.
You go down the line, it's never about, Steph, I need to get an NBA Finals MVP. Whatever's working is working. And
there he goes, bringing it up again, unprompted. It's very obvious that Steph Curry was gunning for the MVP in Game 4, but it was too late. Too little, too late.
And that's what's made us great, in these years we've had.
I got a question. In your private moments, you can obviously gonna tell the truth. Have you ever said to yourself, if I didn't get suspended, this would be 4 in a row?
100%.
Yeah,
I know that.
Yeah.
With me getting suspended, that changed this whole series. I think one thing you take for granted in series is one game can change it.
Absolutely. And that's why I stated during Game 3, Kevin Durant looked at Curry and was like, nigga, I want you to win the NBA Finals MVP, but you fucking around right now. It's one thing if this was Game 4, but this is Game 3. We're only up 2-0. If I let you keep messing around and they win this game, now it's 2-1. Now Game 4 is a must-win game. We lose Game 4. Now we're heading back to Golden State. Game 5, and an absolute must-win game. And you never know what can happen in that game. So Kevin Durant had to take over. He had to come and endear the team in Game 3. Because there is a trickle-down effect. And there's no doubt that after Golden State lost Game 5 at home, you knew that it was coming back to Golden State for Game 7. There was no way that the NBA was going to allow the Golden State Warriors to win Game 6. They would have had to have played a non-pareil game. And with the way that the refs were calling fouls in that series, in the last 3 games of the series, they let it go like they were playing football. They let Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith totally rough up Curry, who had a decent game in Game 6 but lost his composure down the stretch when he realized that there was no way that the refs were going to allow him to finish the game. They gave him a bunch of ticky-tack fouls, which I've never seen an MVP, a regular season MVP, get foul calls like Steph Curry was getting in Game 6 of the 2016 Finals. And it was clear that the NBA narrative was they wanted a Game 7. And this is what I try to communicate to a lot of the two-dimensional thinking dudes that try to act deep with the whole sports is rigged conversation. It's about nuance. It's not about extremes. Sports is about narrative. It's about storytelling. It's a TV show. They don't care necessarily who wins Game 7, but they prefer that they can get it to a Game 7. So if it means that the ref has to give a strategic call to a certain team here or there in a pivotal moment to extend the series, to get it to a point where they can build up the theatrics, the drama, they're going to do that. And of course, they wanted LeBron James to win a championship for Cleveland. That was definitely in the cards. That was in the quote-unquote script. But people have to understand that just because the organization, the league, or what have you that you participate in wants a certain storyline to come to fruition, it does not mean that it always does. Because they did not want the Detroit Pistons to win the championship in 2004. They didn't want the Pistons to win in 89 or 90. CBS would have loved to have had Jordan take over for Magic Johnson after the LA Lakers Showtime dynasty came to an end. But the Detroit Pistons came into prominence. That's how it goes. It wasn't good for the league that Jordan retired or was forced out in 93, whatever you prefer. It wasn't good for them that he retired in 98. But they have to go along with whatever the adjustments are to the overall storyline. In regards to this year, they knew that LeBron had no chance to beat the Golden State Warriors, so there was no need to even try to help him with the refs. Now, if by some miracle he was able to defeat them in his own right, then yes, from Game 5 onward, the Golden State Warriors would have had something to be scared about. But I think that the NBA wanted to wrap up this storyline with LeBron in Cleveland. It's time for him to move on to quote-unquote greener pastures. And what better way to do that than for him to lose in the finals to Golden State? I believe that if Kyrie had not gotten injured or had to have the operation performed on his knee, the Celtics would have beat them. And they probably would have beat the Cleveland Cavaliers in 5 games.
You know, and everybody say, oh, no, you was there for 6 and 7. It's different because now they got the momentum.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I know, you know, if I played in that Game 5, it was over then. But it is what it is, because if that happens, then we probably don't have Kevin Durant. 100%.
Yeah.
And so if that happens, then we probably don't have Kevin Durant, and then who's to say we've won these last 2?
Okay.
Absolutely. And I say this all the time to brothers, not just in frivolous scenarios like what Draymond Green just presented in regards to sports, but also in life. Sometimes, quote-unquote, bad things happen to you to open up greater possibilities in the future. Sometimes you're in a dysfunctional relationship, not just with a female, but just in general, maybe with a family member, maybe with a friend, maybe in your workplace. You might get fired and you think that it's the worst thing ever, and it opens up your mind to greater possibilities. You might say to yourself, you know what, now it's time for me to pursue this vision that I've always had for myself. So you never know. But once again, here's what we do know. There's no way that Kevin Durant would have been able to go and sign with Golden State had they been a 73-win team that won the championship. That would not have happened.
Okay. So everything happens for a reason.
You know, we have a tweet I want to show you. This is the reaction from what's gone out at Oracle tonight and out by the Bay, where they've just been crazy, standing outside in the streets. Can you discuss it? I see you kind of looking and smiling. Just the relationship you guys have built with that area and how much those fans have been the sixth man really for this team over this year.
Those fans are the best. You know, from my rookie year, you know, coming in the year before I got there, I'm not saying this was because of me, but they sucked. And, you know, I walked in.
They did suck. But that also had to do with Steph Curry experiencing a lot of injury issues. A lot of things came together for the Golden State Warriors, or started to come together for them in the 2012-2013 season, and people forget about that a lot. Steph Curry was the leader of that team that season, and he was able to get them past the Denver Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs, and then give the San Antonio Spurs a great run for their money. And he had a couple of standout performances against them in that series. That's why I say a lot of the talk that Curry does not perform well in the playoffs is highly narrative driven.
I walked into that gym and they were still loud as ever.
Right.
They always supported the fans of the fans of Oakland, the fans of the whole Bay Area. Like, they ride with us, and I've never seen anything like it. Like, they treat us like they own, and we appreciate that. We feed off that, and we do this for them.
You talked about it being a difficult run. How important is the level of trust you guys have in each other? Because we were talking about it, whether it was LeBron this time, or we always hear guys talking about their teammates, maybe not lifting them up to the way you would like to hear publicly. You guys always seem publicly and privately to feel that belief at such a high level.
The reason why they have such a high level of trust is because of their great coaching and the system that they run. They know where everyone is going to be, where they're supposed to be, or what they're going to do. That's what happens when you run a real system. When you're running a player-oriented system, when I say a player-oriented system, meaning a system to just highlight one person, and we see that with the Cleveland Cavaliers, with the Oklahoma City Thunder, with the Houston Rockets. Oftentimes, the supplemental parts will start to look around and be confused because they're not running a real system. They don't know where they're supposed to be. They don't know when they're supposed to flare out. They don't know when they're supposed to help the helper. All these things you see on those type of teams. That's why, once again, it's going to be very interesting to see who LeBron James chooses to sign with, which team. Because whoever it is, they're going to have to understand what he's bringing with them. LeBron is like a beautiful woman who's going to demand almost all of your time and all of your income.
That's important. You got to support your guys publicly and privately, because one thing about publicly is all it takes is for one guy to go home and someone say, man, Draymond said this about you, or he didn't have your back on this. And then it gets in the guy's head. And so I think that's...
Absolutely. That's why they have to be very careful with allowing media to hype up the Kevin Durant, Steph Curry Finals MVP issue.
I think that's very important, to keeping that togetherness, and the togetherness is why we win.
All right, we're going to let you run. Be honest. Charles played the same way you do, right? Like, he just...
I watch a lot of film.
Yeah, let's be fair. Okay.
You play defense. You play defense.
You ever see the charge he took on Sean Bradley?
Yeah, that was bad. But I couldn't score the ball like him. So, it's give take.
Hey, man. Congratulations. Well deserved.
Yes, sir.
Charles Barkley was a dominant player in his time. Unfortunately for him, he was unable to get over the hump because he lacked some of those intangibles that you needed. According to Scottie Pippen, after he left the Bulls in 1998, when they finally ended that dynasty, he told Michael Jordan that he was thinking about signing with the Houston Rockets to team up with Hakeem and Charles Barkley. And according to Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan told him, don't sign with the Rockets. Don't try to team up with that fat ass. He's a loser. He'll never have what it takes to win because he's not willing to put in the work. That's what Scottie Pippen stated Michael Jordan said. And that is what I sense Draymond Green understands about Charles Barkley. I think that he can sense that Charles Barkley's jealous of him. Because for all the talent that Charles had over Draymond, there are certain little idiosyncrasies that Draymond brings to the table that always result in winning that Charles did not bring, particularly on the defensive end. But anyway, peace.